Hi and welcome to MockCat. In this video, we're going to be talking about the essay writing which is there in XAT. We'll cover the basic details, we'll look at what is the process that you should use for writing, and we'll analyze some past topics, and I'll also recommend some topics that you could quickly read upon. Now we've shot another video where we are speaking about what is the strategy for your overall XAT exam, especially the important part, which is the 75 questions that we have to solve in 175 minutes this time. So if you've not watched that video, I definitely recommend that you watch that first or maybe immediately after this. This is because your core XAT percentile is going to be determined by that part. The essay writing and the GK, these are things which are only shared with XLRI and no other institute. And even if you don't have a great score in GK, or if they feel that your essay is not up to the mark, there are no specific points for this. This is only something which could have implications in your XLRI personal interview. Whereas your XAT percentile, of course, is extremely important. So definitely check that video out. You will be able to find it here, and it's also there in the description. So now let's talk about the essay itself. These are the changes which have come up this year. Now, the XAT essay is something which has been consistent. There were a couple of years when it was not there, but it was reintroduced last year. But last year we had limited time for the GK as well as the essay, right? So there were 25 minutes in which we had to answer 25 GK questions as well as write the essay. This time we have a little bit of extra time. As you can see in part 3, there are 30 minutes in which we have to solve the GK questions, and then we're going to have to write an essay of up to 300 words. And the good thing is we're going to get 3 topics. So even if there's a particular topic which you don't understand or you don't know much about it, you can still go for it. I'm not going into the part 1 and part 2 because again that's something which we've covered in the overall test, but there's not that many changes out there, just 10 minutes extra. The main thing is we're going to be having 5 minutes extra in essay, and trust me, that 5 minutes, it makes a lot of difference. You can use a substantial chunk of that to actually think through. And another great news is the 3 topics, so that we can choose the one which we are most comfortable with. So when it comes to this part 3, in terms of time, what I would recommend is take about 10 minutes for the GK section. You don't need to overthink. It's very binary, right? Either you know the answer or you don't know it. If you know it, just go for it. If you're torn between a couple, choose any one. But if you don't know it at all, you can just select a consistent option for all the questions where you don't know the answers. Because there's no negative marks in GK. If you get some of them right, it still works out for you. 15 to 20 minutes you can actually use for your essay. You can use some time to just think and plan out your essay, and then you come to it. So now that there are 300 words, this is what I would recommend that you go for. So you'll have an initial introduction. Try and keep it short. A lot of people start writing without having planned, and then what happens is our introduction and maybe one major point become very long, and then we realize that we very few words left for the remaining points. So when you're practicing also, stick to 50, maybe 75 words max, or maximum of 100 words if it's a topic on which you need to give an initial explanation, right? And then we come to the meat or the chunk of the essay, which is your key points. Now, if it is a problem statement, then analyzing the problem could be one paragraph, and then maybe 2 or 3 solutions will be your major points. If it is something where you have to debate, right? Maybe it's for example, last year we had an essay topic which was about democracy and capitalism being sort of against each other. So here you would have key points, right? You could have some points explaining why they're sort of different, and some points explaining no, both can sort of coexist side by side. So these would be your key points. If you just have to look at pros and cons of one particular thing, then again, right, so you could have 3 positives and 3 negatives. Definitely try to make it balanced. Don't go totally positive or totally negative, and definitely try to bring in solutions. So this should be somewhere around 200 to 250 words depending on how much you have written down for the introduction. Now, in between these key points, right, you could also use examples which will support your viewpoint. So if I am saying that no, capitalism and democracy can coexist, I can give examples of India and US, where I'll say that these are 2 countries where there's democracy, and at the same time capitalism is also something which is there. Of course, India is a little bit more socialistic, but over the last couple of decades, since the 1990s, we've actually become more capitalistic, or in the sense that there's a lot more freedom for companies now. So that could be an example which I could give. I could also contrast it with China, where while they've really focused on manufacturing, obviously democracy is something which is limited. It's a single party system. So you can also give examples of both sides and then come to a conclusion. Now you should have a short conclusion. In your conclusion, you can just have one or two sentences where you're reiterating your points. If there are certain solutions that you've recommended, then you could just use your conclusion to reiterate those so that the readers are going to remember it. A short conclusion, 20 to 30 words works best. It will also depend on how many words you've used for the introduction and the key points. Make sure that you have some conclusion so that it's a strong ending as well. So your introduction, your key points, and your conclusion is the structure that you're going for. Now let's look at how would you write it out. For a lot of students, what I've seen is, they start writing it out, especially with our own students when we've given them, time to practice. What we've seen is people start writing it out right away. What I would recommend is think for a minute or two. First of all, look at all of the three topics. There might be two that you're comfortable with. Choose the one which you know that you can write a good essay, right? So it doesn't need to be, it could be a topic where you know a lot of facts, but there could be another topic which you could analyze well and come up with good points. That's what we're looking for in a manager, right? A manager is not someone who needs to memorize everything. A manager is someone who needs to analyze the information, and that is what should be there in your essay as well. So pick the right topic, and once you pick the right topic, jot down the key points. So this could be one or two points which I know I want to put in the introduction, certain key facts maybe, and then what is my viewpoint. So if I'm being asked to argue for or against something, I could have 3 points for, 3 points against. If I'm comparing two things, again I would have similarities and differences. I could also note down examples, things like these. So just note these down. If you have the rough paper from the main exam still with you, you could actually use that. Otherwise you can just type it out in the portal itself, and once you flesh them out, you could delete the points that you've written. So again, spend a couple of minutes at least on this, because this is what is going to help you to write a structured essay. Those who don't do this, what I've seen, like I said, is you might end up having a very long introduction because you are just writing everything or the first point which you have. So maybe it's solutions. You have a couple of solutions in mind, but you end up spending a lot of time on your first solution rather than your second solution. So if you have the skeleton ready, you'll see that the structure of your essay becomes really good. This is also what I would recommend to you to practice, right? In a minute or so, I'm going to give you some areas which you should know about. So what I would recommend is some, of course, you can practice writing out in the format which I said, but for a bunch of topics, what you could do is you could just flesh out the points itself. Analysis of problem, couple of points, analyzing, and then maybe 2 or 3 recommended solutions, point for or against a topic, these sort of things. So if you do that, you're going in, maybe with some amount of prep for whatever essay is going to come on Sunday, and it will also help you to follow these 2 steps which are really important. The other thing to note is try and have a balanced view, right? Don't be overwhelmingly for or against something. So if we have a point like, should education in India be in English or be in vernacular, there are benefits and issues with both, right? So if we have education in English, for example, it helps us from a globalization perspective. We are able to interact with, overseas countries. Most of corporate India speaks in English. You can give examples of exams like XAT itself, which are in English and have a VARC section. So this is something which is helpful. The issue which comes up is that it could increase income inequity. For example, people who are from a poorer strata, they might not, their English might not be as good. They might actually end up doing better in schools if it is in the vernacular language. Also for everybody, right? We might be losing touch with our roots. So if we study our history, our languages, then these are things which will help us to stay in touch. We could also learn other languages. So take a language like Hindi. Now I'm from Orissa, so my native language is Oriya. But the fact that I know Hindi, it helps me to communicate with a large part of the population. So again, you can have positives and negatives both. You could have a view. I'm not saying that you don't need to have a view. You definitely can have a view, but try to have a balanced essay where you're looking at both sides. Wherever possible, try to boost with examples. Any examples, real life situations. It could be examples of countries. It could be, data or statistics, information. Don't spend too much space. You don't need 3 examples, but 1 or 2 well-chosen stats or, well-chosen examples will really help. And it also helps the interviewers understand that this is a topic that you know about. I would say avoid quotes, right, unless it's a short quote. So for example, in the democracy versus capitalism essay, which I had written last time, I had used the quote, that democracy is of the people, for the people, by the people. This was really short, right? It's just 9 words, so it's not taking away too much. But then, starting an essay with a really long quote by someone doesn't help unless it is very hard hitting. I would say your key points and examples are more important. This is, more of, analysis rather than creative writing. Exception would be if it is a hard-hitting quote or something which really speaks to the heart of the quote. Another case is, if you have an abstract topic. So if you have an abstract topic, or it's about, something like, social justice and all of that, there we can look to evoke emotion with quotes. Now let's look at some of the past topics which have come up. So what I've done out here is I've listed out some of the topics which we've seen over the last few years. We've tried to split it into the different areas which are there. So one common theme you see is, politico-economics. So last year, for instance, we had 2 topics: capitalism and democracy cannot coexist. And we also had another topic which was about taking people who've experienced setbacks in management. This is not exactly a topic on economics. This is more of business, but it's somewhat suitable for this. We've also had topics, as you can see, on contrasting capitalism and socialism, economic growth with or without the environment. That's something which we've also seen. Another topic like technology and nature are natural enemies, which we've listed out here in the issues, which is our second rectangle out here, right? Economy post WTO, economic growth without distributive justice. So this essentially means ensuring that any economic growth in a country is sort of distributed to everybody. It's not just the rich becoming richer while the poor stay where they are. So these are some of the common themes which run. What you can also see out here is, other than the mention of WTO, there's nothing very specific about a particular year, right? So these are general topics which can be sort of used year on year. In fact, if you see economic growth without environmental damage, something like technology and nature are natural enemies. These are things which keep recurring, right? So something like nature or climate change, these are things which keep coming up. Even economic growth, sharing the wealth, these are again things which would keep coming up. When it comes to issues, globalization and jingoism always coexist. We can consider this as an issue or even as a politics topic, because jingoism, extreme nationalism, you can also write on that side. Corruption, again a common favorite. This has come up at least a couple of times. And one of the more interesting topics within issues, I thought, was the one in 2012 where we were given 2 statements, right? Is poverty too big a problem to solve, or is it a consequence of issues or failures within the government? And we had to choose one side and argue for that and preferably give examples. So this type of topic also is something which we could expect. This is something which is usually a fixture in the IMA AWT, but even in XAT essays, since we have 3 topics especially this time, you could expect to see something like this. Now, there have also been, other things. So ethical practices, slightly more abstract topics like, listening, beauty, what nature provides again. These are also things which have come up. Again, since we are expecting 3 topics, one of the topics could be abstract. So for those of you, if you feel that there are a couple of topics which you don't know much about, but you could write about the abstract topic, that is definitely something which you can do. Now, hopefully by now you've already seen these previous topics and written about them or practiced them. What we've also done to help you is there's a link in the description where I've written out essays for both the topics which came up in 2022. The word limit was rather shorter then, but here I've written it in 300 words. So you'll be able to see the format which I had mentioned in terms of intro and key points and conclusion, and something like that is the format which you could look to replicate. Now, if we look at the common themes, economics, business, and a little bit of politics, these are things which have definitely been common. We also saw that these are not very specific, right? So they won't speak about something very specifically which is happening, but it could be inspired from that topic. I'll also give you some examples in about a minute. Another common theme is some sort of social issues, so distribution of income, as well as issues like climate change. So sustainability, that's been a fixture again. You can also have abstract topics like we saw, beauty, listening, and so on. So these are the areas that you should read upon. So here are some ideas about what are the areas that you could prep. So we definitely can expect something on democracy. So this is something which you can read up. So what happened, in US since, Trump got elected, or even a little bit about China, how it's a one-party system. India, how, the vote share of a single party has increased, the number of states have increased. It won't be a very controversial topic most likely, but it could be something around, how democracy should spread, or, autocratic governments and things like that, how that's on the rise, or how can how with internet it could be reduced, or maybe it's not been reduced, so things around that. So these are areas which you could read up, and you could also try to jot down a few key points. Another topic which could come up could be around world peace or the effectiveness of sanctions. So we might not get direct mention of, countries like, let's say, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or something like North Korea or something like that. But we could have, we could be asked how world peace could be spread, or it could even be a negative topic saying that, it's something which is, just a myth, it cannot be achieved. We could also have, the effectiveness of sanctions. It could also be something like, is, the fact that, the dollar has such a large share, does that give undue power to the US? Or because of the US enforcing sanctions, could we have something like, the countries are trying to, use their own currencies. So Russia, China, India, all of us are trying to do that, right? So could it actually end up weakening the dollar and maybe a little bit the euro also? So things like these, again, arguments for or against are good things. And, from a world peace perspective, other solutions other than sanctions are things which you could look at. So think of also, bodies like the UN, what they can do, how countries can come together, and things like that. Another topic which could come up is around globalization. So this could be how globalization is now coming back after the pandemic and the lockdowns. Maybe how certain countries are seeking to go local, or it could also be specific to India as to how India can maybe how can we increase our exports, and not just software and services exports, but also manufacturing, given the situation in China. Right. So for something like this, I would not speak only about manufacturing. I would also talk about, how the fact that we have a lot of youngsters, we have a lot of intellectual capital, and we are already into services. So how could we increase innovation? How could we maybe, become like, the R&D capital of the world? These are sort of things which you can write about. And in fact, we can also expect to get a topic like that. I vaguely remember there was a topic in the past as well around how there's not that much innovation in India, right? Other things which you could read up on are also, countries where there is a lot of innovation. So let's take US. What is it that is supporting that? So it could be, the schooling system being different, or having strong patent laws. So things like these, or, the fact that in India we tend to focus only on a few specializations. So how can we have a more diverse, a more holistic set of, education pedagogy? So these are things, again, which you could look up on. If you also know facts, I mean, almost everybody knows that, China is sort of the manufacturing capital of the world. But if you also know things like, there's a lot of apparel which happens in Bangladesh, or, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Taiwan, these sort of areas. Or if you know about how, there's a lot of countries which are headquartered, or a lot of business deals which happen from Singapore, London, Dubai, they have been set up as areas where there's very little red tape. So these are, again, things which will help you. So these are some of the topics that you could read about. Climate change, it's been a favorite. So there could be some topic around it. So knowing about, let's say, what's happening in Brazil with the Amazon forest, just some general stats, reading up a little bit about COP26, COP27, the Paris Accords. You don't need to memorize, but you just need to know some of the things which have happened. So, the fund which has been set up this year to help countries which are impacted by climate change. Possibly, in the future, India also could be asked to contribute because there are a lot of emissions which are there. So just knowing which are the countries which have a lot of emissions, so US, China, on a per capita basis, or if we consider the past, US is more, overall it's China that's more. So this is something which in fact, Trump used to talk about a lot. So knowing all of these, thinking of potential solutions, even, some out of the box solutions, one being sort of, colonizing perhaps the moon or Mars. These are, again, things which could crop up. Now, when we speak about colonizing the moon or Mars, another topic which we could expect is space tourism. So the fact that now there's a lot of countries which are getting into it, or, even private players, this is something which could come up. Is it something which is ethical? Again, this is something which could harm the environment, or it could be something which only billionaires can do. Speaking of this, not a topic which I've mentioned, but something which just occurs to me, in the income inequality or inequity front, there could also be something around, more expensive medicine or genes or things like that. Even things like the vaccine, right? There was a time when richer countries, most of the citizens had booster doses, but there were countries in Africa where only 2% or 8-10% of the population was vaccinated. So anything which is around social justice definitely can come up. So you can think of, so this is one example, of course, space tourism, but others could be related to vaccines, related to medicine, such as being able to edit genes. Things like these are things again which only the rich can think of. Another topic, again more specific to India, could be education within India. So what are the things which we can do to increase education? Things like NEP, which had come up earlier. Also, the languages part, we already spoke about it, how we could have, studying in vernacular, or even interaction. Should something like, Hindi be made compulsory? So these sort of things, the more you know about, the better it would be. And a last topic which I feel could come up is related to social media. So these could be positive. It could be about, how companies are now able to use social media, to directly reach out to their clients, how smaller businesses have propped up. There are a lot of entrepreneurs now in India. So things around that. It could also be around the negative. So, a lot of usage of social media, it's been linked to depression, trolling, how, we are always on our phones. So, there's less of like idle time, less creativity. So things like these. Also, tech topics like, AI on the rise. So chat GPT, things like that, again are topics which could come up and areas that you could read upon. So that's it for this video. Please do check out the other video which we have on the XAT strategy, because that's the most important part. That is what is going to contribute to your percentile. You can check out the 2 essays that I've written. The link is there in the description. All the best to you for XAT as well as for all your other interviews. And if you like this video, please do like it so that it reaches a lot of people, and consider subscribing, because we're going to have a lot of content about different exams and colleges, interview process and so on. So wish you all the best from all of us here at MOCAT.